Nintendo re-released another Zelda game. God, why do they keep on doing this? All they do is re-release the same games over and over again. Well, this time I say no. I will not continue to be a stupid consumer. I will take my money and hang on to it.
Damn it!
I remember when I first saw the trailer for Skyward Sword back in 2011, feeling a bit bummed about it. I liked the dark gritty direction the series took with Twilight Princess, and seeing the bright paint splatter was a bit of a downer, ironically. Now I still was going to play it, it's a Legend of Zelda game, of course I had to play it. But sadly, all the hours I spent playing Ninja Breadman caused my Wii to explode and I never got to play it. Years later I acquired another Wii because how else was I going to play Just Dance 3? But I never jumped back to get Skyward Sword because at that point the game was known for how disappointing it was. So this re-release is my first time playing Skyward Sword, so for me, it's a new Zelda game. And a great start, I get to name Link. That's something Breath of the Wild skipped out on, but that's because of the voiceovers. Which, again, I'm not complaining about, I'm not original with naming Link, but here I'm gonna try something new. George. So George lives in Skyloft, a city placed above the clouds after the gods were tired of all the evil in the ground, so civilization continues as everyone flies around on birds. George attends the Knights Academy with childhood friend Zelda, where the two can't stop making googly eyes at each other long enough to stop them from avoiding this tornado that caused Zelda to go missing. So George saddles up to go find her and takes the goddess sword, which houses Fi. And oh god, Fi is definitely not one of the franchise's better companions. She really made me miss Navi. But anyway, George falls to the land below to search for Zelda while also competing against the game's main antagonist, Girahim, who is also after her. And, fun fact, also has his own YouTube channel called Master of Quack. Now while on the search for Zelda, George is also on his own journey to become a worthy hero, and we do this by traveling through the three lands, flying through the skies, and conquering some good old classic dungeons. Ah, the Zelda dungeons, the main attraction of the franchise. Wonderful playgrounds of puzzles that can be formulaic but have enough variables to keep them interesting and unique. You reach the main room, figure out the gimmick of the temple, find some keys, find a dungeon map, fight some mini bosses until you get the dungeon item and use that item to access new areas, complete some puzzles, find the boss key, defeat the boss, and feel that rewarding experience until you have to do it all over again. On average, it takes about 40 minutes to complete a Zelda dungeon, and at the end of it, it feels like an accomplishment. The first 70% of a temple is usually just you trying to make sense of the layout and what goals need to be accomplished, but then it hits a turning point where it becomes a satisfying water slide. Nintendo's really good at making Zelda dungeons, they really are my cup of tea, and Skyward Sword has some of the most memorable dungeons. The Ancient Cistern, the Mining Facility, the Fire Sanctuary, and Sandship all provided a good time. So good of a time, it starts to really make me wonder what happened in 2011 that made this game looked down upon within the community. Well, time to dig out the old Wii, grab a copy of Skyward Sword, and find out for myself. Ah, it all makes sense now. The controls are piss. Skyward Sword was heavy into the motion controls and it needed the Wii Motion Plus. Fortunately, I have a few of these things lying around the house because I fell hard onto the Wii U Sports Resort craze. But anyway, Skyward Sword needed it to accurately measure your movements because in the game, how you handle your sword was essential to the gameplay. How you swing your sword is reflected on the screen, like holding your controller upwards will have George deliver a skyward strike, you need to rotate your sword to open certain doors, and certain enemies can only be damaged through certain angles of attack. See, in theory it sounds like it could be fun, but in execution, I'm not doing this for 50 f***ing hours. I played it on the Wii until I finished the first temple, and yeah, I could see where things went wrong. How did they solve this on Switch? Well, they put the sword controls onto the right stick, and I'll admit, at first this felt a bit janky, but with time I really started digging it. Combat feels much faster, and dealing with enemies that change their defensive angles is less of a hassle. Now, if you actually like the motion controls, there is an option to use them. Personally, I pretended I didn't see that. I really like the button-only controls for Skyward Sword HD. And considering I'm not having motion controls blind me with annoyance, I can enjoy this game for what it is. A really good Zelda game. See, earlier I was taking a jab at Nintendo re-releasing games, but in all honesty, I'm sure if we all had an opportunity to fix a mistake from our past, we'd jump at it if we could. See, let's look back at Wind Waker. I don't like this game, not because of all the sailing, but because of the fetch questing sequence at the end of the game when you're gathering the 8 pieces of the Triforce of Courage. See, first you have to find 8 charge across the vast ocean, and then bring them to Tingle, who will charge you 400 rupees to decipher each chart, and what an outrageous overcharge. Didn't we grant this man his freedom earlier? What's this bullshit? And after that, you have to save for what feels like an eternity to find the pieces of the Triforce, and oh good god, was this a struggle to get through. But when Nintendo re-released Wind Waker for the Wii U, they fixed this sequence and dropped the number from 8 to 3, and that sounds a lot more doable. See, when I played Wind Waker, I told myself that if I didn't have enough rupees to pay for these outrageous deciphers, I would have just stopped playing and not lose any sleep over it. Fortunately, I did. But I do know for certain that if I ever play Wind Waker again, I'll buy a whole Wii U before subjecting myself to the GameCube's fetch quest again. But yeah, Nintendo fixed Wind Waker and did the same thing for Skyward Sword. They saw that they had a great game that got hindered by being on a gimmicked console, so let's just throw this one a life raft. Now, Skyward Sword isn't all perfect. It does still have a few things that aren't too great, like George's limited storage, Fee makes me roll my eyes anytime she pops up on screen, the quest of bringing the water cauldron up to the fire sanctuary was tedious, and worst of all, having to fight the imprisoned 3 times. Now, fighting a boss multiple times isn't a bad thing as long as it serves the story and delivers a real grudge match about it. I didn't have a problem fighting Girahim 3 times because each time felt more intense, but the imprisoned, however, he can go f himself. But besides all that, Skyward Sword HD is a great Zelda experience that I feel people shouldn't overlook because of the wonky past. Now, I could and should leave it at that, but I see a perfect opportunity to destroy any chance that this channel might have, so I'm just going to compare this game to Breath of the Wild. Now, if we look at the 3 criteria I use to judge Zelda games, which are combat, charm, and dungeons, Skyward Sword HD blows Breath of the Wild out of the water. Combat-wise, George managed to keep one sword for his whole adventure, while Link was using weapons that are as flimsy as dudes named Eob. Sure, shields broke in Skyward Sword, but George didn't have garbage durability unlike other people. I didn't need to use a shield. Admittedly, the mid-air bullet time is cool, but after I got the notification that the Master Sword broke, this game had no redemption. Now, both games were pretty charming with its side characters. If anything, Breath of the Wild actually had a slightly better cast. The difference maker is the relationship between Link and Zelda. See, Link and Zelda have always had a professional relationship of, you see that guy? Fuck that guy. Yeah, fuck that guy. In Skyward Sword, there's something more going on, and it's enough to make you blush. In Breath of the Wild, God, Zelda was such a bitch to Link. She was almost intolerable with how much she complained, and sure, it was neat seeing her eventually warm up to Link, but there was never any payoff to make it satisfying. And lastly, with dungeons, this one isn't even up for debate. F the Breath of the Wild dungeons, they were awful. That said, I'll add to my quote that Skyward Sword HD is a better Zelda game than Breath of the Wild. So long credibility, I guess. But I don't want anyone thinking I don't like Breath of the Wild. I really liked playing it. I just wish there was more to the game than just walking in fields for 10 hours. Why would I do that in a game when I could just do that in real life?